Hi, this is Kai with Ska Fabricating. We're going to go over the setup of your new half pint. We're going to start with a twist rinse, how to put that all together and bend it to your particular facility and elevation heights. Then we'll go over overview of how the machine works, what buttons there are, the sensors, and how to operate it, and then we'll go through a full startup. Here's the lower mounting bracket for your rinse cage. This is a typical setup when going onto a conveyor. However, depending on what you're going into, your different fillers, different conveyors, it can be bolted on where we bolted it on. It can be bolted on through the top. The width is adjustable. The height is also adjustable up and down here on the post. Some fillers, the frame of the filler is square tubing, and you might not need this at all. You may only need the clamp and the post to connect to the rinse cage. The rinse cage is going to come through right here. Here's our rinse cage temporarily mocked up for our conveyor. Now these rinse cages come purposely a little long, and you're going to have to do some cutting and bending to make them customizable to your particular situation, elevation, and what you're going into. This one looks like right here, we need to take a little bit off of this to make it a smooth transition. Down at the bottom, this is long, we'll have to cut it, that's normal. And this will go down into here, and we'll drill a hole where necessary. And then we will bend the top and the bottom to make them a smooth transition in and a smooth transition out. The reason why we leave these rinse cages long is because there are many varying heights depending on what you're going into, heights and lengths, and we leave this to be customizable to your particular application. It's a lot easier to cut a little off than it is to stretch stainless steel. This is the base for the rinse tunnel. It goes on these tabs right here. We're going to slide it up and then attach it with the 1/4 inch bolts provided. Installing the rinsers in the rinse tunnel. That little hole there. This is easily adjustable back and forth. Lock this 1/2 inch nut down. And then these are adjustable to spray inside of the can. So what happens is the can comes down, flips over, is washed by these 4 sprayers, and then drains here. 1/2 inch hose, you hook up your water here to your water source, and we include a hose barb to regulate your water. And then here we have the drain at the bottom side. Once you've got your water hookups all hooked up and the nozzles adjusted, simply put the cover on. As you can see, in order to make this fit and the tongue long enough to go on the conveyor, we're going to have to cut right here and bend these accordingly. Now we're going to show you a rinse cage that we have cut and pre-bent for this. We're gonna bend this transition. This one I've already got preliminarily bent a little bit. To bend these, we use tools that look like this with a little notch in them. Bend them in and out. You can use alternative tools. You can use a closed end of some wrenches, but if you're doing that, just be careful that you're making gradual turns and not marring the inside of this too much. The sides you want to flow nicely. The trick is the top and the bottom. The bottom, you want a nice steady transition. The top you want tight enough to where the can can't flip forward or backwards when it takes that angle down, but if it's not so tight that the can gets stuck. So for example, that works well. If it gets stuck somewhere in here, you can adjust that by pulling these out. The bottom transition, also bent. This hovers just about 1/8 of an inch above the can. These flow nice. The bottom, we have to cut and make a little ramp to make a smooth transition onto the conveyor. Up a little bit, we'll adjust that. Just by hand here. And there they go, nice flow onto the conveyor. Let's see about that. Okay. Not super happy with this transition right here, seems to be getting stuck sometimes. Loosen it up. And when you're adjusting these rails, you're going to want to make small bends at a time. Just a little bit. You don't want to put crimps or tool marks in it. Just a little bit of a bend at a time. Test it with a can. And what you want is enough room that it slides easily, not so much that it can tip over. About 1/8 of an inch above it, so that they flow nicely. These you're going to want to get up out of your way, obviously not sticking into the cans. But I like to put a little bend on the top so that it can't catch that lip. As an overview of the sensors that we have on here, we have an upper limit proximity sensor, a lower limit proximity sensor. They're adjustable, but they're behind here, and you shouldn't have to adjust them very much. They control the upper limit and the lower limit of the rising and lowering of the carriage itself. We have 2 proximity sensors that sense the frontward and home position of the sweep. They're on this side. There's one in here that sets the front limit of the sweep. There's one back here, which is currently triggered. You can tell because there's a yellow light. And those are flagged by this piece of metal that's right here. You want those sensors to be not only in the right position forward and backwards, but close enough that they can trigger on there. You want the home position to be furthest most back and out of the cage. And then for the front one, you want it to be slightly onto the dead plate. We are checking the front proximity sensor to make sure it's in the right position. I'm going to go to the HMI here. This is the main menu screen. Go to manual and manually sweep it forward. Coming forward. You should sweep a little bit onto the dead plate. There are 2 photo eyes. There's one right here. It's called the advanced photo eye, and it senses when there is a gap in the cans. So it tells the sweep to hold off and not incrementally push until this is clear, and when it's clear, the sweep will push incrementally until it's blocked again and keep going. The other photo eye is the can height photo eye. It senses the top of the can and thus orients the bottom of the can to the dead plate. When you get your half pint, they will be all the way down, and they're made to go all the way down to ease the height of this from going in and out of a box truck. So there's a simple adjustment here, and we're just gonna go ahead and get it up and go more into how to fine tune this thing in a minute. The reflector, there's this thumb screw as well as the can height photo eye. We just make it go up, and preliminarily we may have to adjust it up and down a little bit or lock it into place here just as a starting point. Also, there are your hose manifold brackets right here, also go up the same way. Push them up to get this hose up and out of the way. I'm going to set the can height photo eye now. I prefer to use an empty pallet and a tier sheet and a few cans to get it close, to get it really close before I put an entire pallet of cans in there. Just so if it's not quite right, it's a lot easier to adjust without the whole pallet of cans in. Tier sheet and a few loose cans here. Lock the door lock. So at this point, with the pallet in and cans, I'm gonna wanna manually raise it to get an idea of where that photo eye goes. Manual control, this up button is not there. And it's not there if it isn't there. It's there for two reasons. It's there either the sweep isn't home, which will make the sweep go home, and so the sweep is at home, or the photo eye isn't seeing itself. It thinks it's blocked. So to even start, we're gonna have to get the photo eye to see its reflection. This is, I can see the red dot in the photo eye. It's not quite in the reflector. Give it make it reflect towards itself. Now we should have that button. Now that we've aimed the photo eye at the reflector, we're still gonna have to adjust the height, but now that the up arrow should be there and we can manually raise the carriage and orient it to the dead plate. Okay, to adjust this photo eye, you want to adjust it to where it will stop at the top of the cans with the tier sheet below the cans oriented to the dead plate, just below the dead plate. It's made so when this pushes forward, the tier sheet catches in this little notch rather than go out onto the dead plate. If it's even with it or a little bit high, the tier sheet will come out onto the dead plate. The way I do this is I'll put some example cans in front of it and lower it to where the photo eye isn't seeing itself in the reflector anymore. And then go about 1/4 of an inch below. That 1/4 of an inch is to account for the time it's going to take between when this photo eye sees itself and the motor actually stops. And then I'll do a couple of test lifts to make sure I've got it set right and adjust accordingly. So now I'm gonna go back to the manual screen, lower this to where it is 1 can height below, and go ahead and press start and see where it stops when it senses the can height. That looks like I need to go a little bit further down for one can height. Put my prop hands in front of where the photo eye will be. That looks pretty good. Just a tiny bit, maybe an eighth of an inch, 16th of an inch below the dead plate, the surface of this tier sheet. Just to reiterate, to make it go down one can height to test this, I went to the main menu, pressed the down arrow, set it at the height that the top of the can was level to the dead plate, so one can height below, and then press start and let it come up and stop where it naturally would when it would be running in auto mode. To make the adjustment of this a little easier, notice where the photo eye is on the can. It's just about a quarter of an inch below the top of it. If you keep that in mind, it'll make adjusting that photo eye a lot faster. Ensure that the door lock is all the way closed, or it will disable the lift from going up and down. We're gonna go ahead and load a pallet now. Ideally, you'd cut the banding that goes crossways, but leave this banding on to keep it all nice and stable. Plastic shrink wrap around it is not good for the tier sheath, and you're gonna wanna take that off beforehand, but leave these on. Grab your buddy, and you're gonna have to lift it up and carefully put it in without dropping any cans. Here's the hard way. We'll show you the easy way in a second. And it's in. You would then cut these bands, close and lock the door, and then raise it to where the top of your first layer is even with the dead plate, and then hit start. The easier way to load the pallet is to put two empty pallets down first, put your pallet on top of it, and then load. It's just a little less lifting. Cut your banding. Carefully remove your top frame and first tier sheet. Then close and lock the door. Once you get your machine plugged in, and you're going to want to plug in your air, it's right here, plugs in into this quick fitting, and it's only going to use about 20 pounds. All that enacts is the piston on the back of the sweep that raises and lowers the tier sheet arm. We're going to turn it on, and it's going to take a second to boot up. You'll see this screen. Go ahead and walk you through the HMI screens. Home screen is what you'll mostly be using. This is the home screen. This is manual control, so you can manually raise, lower, sweep forward, and sweep back. Now notice when the sweep was not at home, we lost the lift carriage button again. It's saying that you are not allowed to lift the carriage because the sweep is in the way. So we have to go home first. You can make the tier sheet go up and down, vibrator on and off. The vibrator, located right here, vibrates the whale tail to shake the cans down in lieu of a conveyor. The other screen that you'll use is the main screen, and this is where your start button is, your stop button, carriage down, sweep home again, and your vibrator on and off. If the vibrator is not enough or too much, you can set that in settings. You can set the intensity of the vibrator motor. 42 is an awful lot. We'll 42. And that can bounce cans around a lot. There's 42. I think to start with, I would start in the mid to low 30s. These other settings are for forward speed. This is forward speed in auto. And the jog and backward speed is the sweep. These are sweep speeds. The speed of the sweep going backwards or in manual. You can also set the distance, which is the increments that the sweep pushes each time it checks with the advanced photo eye. And you can set that in inches. We're going to start with 5 inches. We've got our pallet of cans in there, ready to go. We've adjusted the photo eye, added air, and we're ready to go. But before you hit start, you're going to want to raise the cans to a can height below where they're going to start. If you hit start from here, that motor ramps up and ramps down, and it takes a little bit for it to stop. So the faster it hits the photo eye, the longer it takes to stop. What'll happen is your first layer will be higher than the dead plate, causing the tear sheet to come out with it. So I preferred to go to the manual control and manually raise it to where my first layer I want to start, the top of it is level with the dead plate before hitting start. From the manual screen, I'm going to go back to the main menu, turn the vibrator on, and then hit start. That should be our first push. Now it's in auto mode, however it's not auto sweeping yet because nothing has gone past this advanced photo eye. There is a manual button to get it to push, and that'll also allow us to preload the whale tail. With the whale tail all loaded, it's now in auto. And we can start feeding. Should you need to adjust your can flow a little bit, this is all adjustable here with these bolts and these bolts to change the angle of the whale tail. Change your transition a little bit to get better flow. We had to bend these a little bit to make it flow a little better. And also on the settings page, you can change the intensity of the vibrator. We've flattened this tail out a little bit, gave it a little bit more pitch, and then set the vibrator from 34 up to 42. 42 is about the maximum you're gonna wanna run. It's pretty violent on this whale tail, but any faster or higher than that and cans are gonna start falling down. You're also gonna have to play with the angle a little bit. We can get a little more angle out of this one because we're running 12-ounce cans. If you run taller cans, you're going to want less of an angle because they'll be more apt to fall forward. We're going to go ahead and finish the end of this layer, and the tier sheet arm will come down, make contact with the tier sheet, and we'll eject it out the back. End of our little training video. I hope you found it helpful. If there's any comments or questions, don't hesitate to contact us at skafabricating.com.